In 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was released. It thrilled fans, it chilled critics, and years later, the infamy of the film still continues to rise. In 1980, Friday the 13th was released, and from that point on, the slasher genre was in full swing. But this original Blood and Guts film was a lot more than just another slasher. Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus Friday the 13th on Horror Face Off.
All right, everybody, welcome to Horror Face Off. This is season 2, and we have heavy hitters on the panel and as movies tonight. We have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre original versus the Friday the 13th original, as Mia will display there. Their legendary series, whether they all have great installments afterwards. For the most part, the first originals are pretty solid. And we got some returning guests, we got some regular guests, and we got some new guests. So I'm gonna get right down to the new guests. Brad, how's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. What? How did I find you?
Well, you found me by finding my cafe first and coming in here. And I actually didn't even meet you. I think the first time you just came in and you kind of fell in love with the cool amp that we have here. And then we kind of became friends after that and started chatting.
Yeah. So Brad, tell us about your place. It's a pretty amazing establishment that I have to visit more often. And it's in my neighborhood. Everything's always in the United States. I finally have something in my backyard and I don't go to it. So tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So I own Deadly Grounds Coffee Canada, which originally started off as a coffee distribution company. We used to do like fan expos, Comic-Con, things like that. And then people kept asking, when are you going to open up a brick and mortar? When are you going to have a cafe? And long story short, we were running out of room. We were getting busier and busier. So we were doing this originally from our home. And then we thought, okay, well, if we could find the right spot, we'll have a packaging place. And then let's open up a cat in the front, just basically as home base. And that's exactly what we did. We started off, you've seen it, and it's what I'll call the 3.0 incarnation. The original incarnation of this cafe was actually quite smaller. It was just a straight rectangle when you came in the door. And then we blew it out 2,500 square feet for our packaging and seating, and the Super Zuka Auditorium, which is right behind me here, which is packed full of horror props and shirts and mugs and things like that. The cafe itself, of course, we have 35 plus roasts and flavors on the hopper at any given time. And people, in our area, in the Toronto area, we really developed kind of a cult following. It's the place to travel to on a Saturday or Sunday. So we have the main cafe, and then we just opened our second location in the Oshawa Center here, the mall. So we have call them the DG Express. And then we're opening up our third location in the Ottawa area in July. So, and that's going to be another full-size cafe where we do, like this past weekend, we had the cat and dog from Pet Cemetery and, doing awesome. Autographs and photo ops. So we do a lot of the local celebrities that are in the Toronto area. We'll bring them out, and in between conventions and movies, and they'll come out for a day and sign autographs and meet their fans.
That's awesome. Yeah, and like I said, it's a really, really amazing place. If you're ever in Toronto, you have to look it up. Deadly Grounds. Great name. And I will say this, amazing coffee. And I wouldn't say that because I like your place. I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. It's got amazing coffee from what I had anyway. So thumbs up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Universal Monsters. An amazing Instagram page. Brian, tell us about yourself.
My name is Brian Rodriguez. I live here in California, LA. I frequent Universal Studios Hollywood, and so as a kid I grew up with the Universal Monsters, watching these classic movies, and I don't know, as a kid, not too many people were into it that were my age. So years later, I started an Instagram page, and here I am with 50,000 followers strong and a lot of monster kids behind it.
Nice. Yeah, it's a great page, and that the Universal monsters are close to my heart. So I love what you do. John, how's it going? Welcome
Doing
back.
great. My name's John Popa. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I do boring bank stuff all day. I do work event staff at a local haunted house called Fear Columbus. So if you're ever in Columbus, feel free to look up Fear. It's a really great haunted house. Again, I wouldn't just say that. I probably wouldn't work there if it wasn't, but it's a pretty amazing place. That's my story.
Nice, nice. And our alumni, our Hall of Famer, Mia. I think everybody that watches the show probably knows everything about you, but if there's anything you want to say, have at it.
Hi friends, I'm Mia. My Instagram is what Mia said, and recently I've been taking to theming myself to something of the movies, whatever I have the most resources for. And today I decided to do Friday the 13th camp counselor with my little scrunchie, sunglasses. I've got my machete, bloody machete earrings, kind of like an 80s type shirt. And last night I kind of themed my drink to the vibe. So I got a red solo cup and just pretending that I'm at Camp Crystal Lake.
Awesome. All right. Well, anyways, thank you. We have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacres, are like I said, indelible fixtures in the horror world. So I'm kind of excited to see which one comes out on top. They both have their strengths, they both have their faults. We're gonna start with the plot, and we're gonna start off with John, because chronologically or just aesthetically, you're the logical.
I prefer to think it's because I'm the best, but okay, you can use
We'll see.
You can use the Zoom method too. No, this was, again, neither of these are deeply complicated plots. They're not intended to be. But I do think there's almost an absence of story in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where I do think Friday kind of has a little bit of a mystery it's playing around with. Again, it's not Agatha Christie by any stretch, but there's definitely, in terms of plot and story, there's a little bit more in Friday. I realize Texas Chainsaw not having a lot of story is kind of a vibe it's going for. But looking at plot only, I'll give F13 the nod, just because again there was a little bit going on there that's a little unexpected.
All right, Brad.
Well, I think I agree a lot with what John said. Friday the 13th didn't necessarily, create anything that wasn't already existing. It just had it managed to cultivate a larger audience with how it was telling the story, I think, and reach more people. Texas Chainsaw, the original, of course, there's a lot to be said about what wasn't said. And we kind of course, come out to, learn about that in part 2 and so on and so forth. So, I think that kind of gave, in my opinion, Texas Chainsaw a little leg up, because you were left with a lot of like, what's next? Like, when Friday ended, I mean, you could kind of tell there would probably be sequels. I mean, I don't even think at the time that was necessarily something that was asked, if I remember correctly. But Texas Chainsaw, I really wanted to know more about that family. I really wanted to know more about Sally. And I think to me, Texas Chainsaw kind of gets a bit of a nod just because of the ambiguity of it.
All right, cool. I love that already. We're disagreeing. All right, Ryan, have at it.
I think I'm gonna go with Texas Chainsaw, just because, as much as I love Friday the 13th, I do think the motivations of the characters with they're going to see their grandpa's place and all that is a little bit stronger than just opening up a camp counseling, opening up the camp again and just having the counselors there. I like the more family thing. They're gonna go kind of like figuring out what happened to the grandpa's grave and why he was dug up and stuff. So I think I'll go with Texas Chainsaw. I think it's a little bit more emotionally strong.
All right, and we're gonna go to Mia.
I didn't know where I was going to go with this until I listened to everybody else, but I am going to agree with John, because I would have to agree. there is a murder mystery element to it. I feel like that is strong in a plot because it keeps you guessing who did what, whereas we would know exactly who's doing what in Texas Chainsaw. You also have Crazy Ralph. There's a backstory going on to the camp itself, which is like kind of an underlayer to the plot itself. So I do, when I first thought about this, I was going to go with Brad because the kind of just weirdness to Texas Chainsaw, I guess I was listening to that point and that's kind of where I was going to, but I think John just makes more sense and I'm going to agree with John and go with Friday.
If I could just interject for a second as well. I mean, you made a good point there, Mia, and I actually made a note of this when I was kind of scribbling some stuff last night. You know, it's the side characters and the background characters of Friday that does give it a little bit more of a than what Texas Chainsaw does. Right? I mean, we have a core 6 people in Texas Chainsaw. In Friday, I mean, we have the whole community. We have you know Ralph, Ralph, and it's like it adds different dimension to it. So I did make note of that as well.
Nice. All right, so I'm gonna okay, I love both these films and they're both probably in my horror top 5, I would assume, without thinking of a list. But I really banged the drum of Friday the 13th as an underappreciated film. I really think that this film just gets tossed away because it doesn't have Jason in a mask, and then that kind of pisses me off. And I think it also gets a lot of bad just a bad rep for being just a Halloween ripoff. And I know the makers of Friday the 13th have just blatantly said it, but I think it was good. Like it was a murder mystery, and no one, now you know, but no one saw the mother being the killer and whatnot. So I kind of I really feel that this movie doesn't get the credit it deserves as an individual film, and I love the lore that they kind of built, and that's why I'm going to give it to Friday the 13th. Like, it was kind of cool. The townspeople were, you know, preaching this doomsday story. The water went bad. Like, what the hell is that? Like, how does the lake water go bad, and fires and stuff? So there was a lot of story in there, glazed over as the film goes on because it becomes a slasher, an all-out slasher. But the beginning, I think the framework in the beginning of Friday the 13th was setting up to be something a little bit more special than maybe it ended up becoming. Long answer, sorry. I'm gonna go with Friday, but yeah, it was tough. Anybody else? Good, moving on. All right, divided already. I love it. Okay, settings. So obviously very distinct settings. We'll start off with Brian on this one.
So with Friday the 13th, you have the campgrounds, which are, I think it was like one of the earliest movies to really do it. With Texas Chainsaw, I like the more rural Texas stuff too. But I got to go with Friday the 13th. Set the ground for the campground setting. Easily one of the best settings. The kids are kind of stranded alone, no parents around. Woods at night, the rain, especially that thunderstorm at the end that lasts for like the whole third act, is a fantastic combination with the forest. So I think I'm gonna go with Friday the 13th, like, easily.
All right, Mia.
So I feel like no matter what, the woods are always going to be scary. But to me, I want to pick what's more interesting. And honestly, like rural Texas is scary. They're crazy motherfuckers down there, crazy motherfuckers everywhere. But like, you know, I think the setting of the house, the bones, and just his sliding door, I think all of that is more interesting to watch. Whereas we're all familiar with what the woods and, you know, potentially what a summer camp looks like. And while the woods are always scary, I think it's more interesting and the set is more well done, I guess, because they actually had to really create a set, whereas they were already taking over a Boy Scout camp. They didn't build the camp for this. They were just taking over a camp that was already existing. So I'm gonna go with Texas Chainsaw.
John.
This one was tough for me because I've been to Camp Crystal Lake. I've done the tour of the camp and drove around Blairstown looking for all the sites where you can find all the places that Annie walked around. So I have a lot of affection for that trip I took and seeing all the, because it all looks pretty much exactly the same. If you guys ever get a chance to do the Crystal Lake tours of the movie site for the first Friday, please do it. You'll have a blast. It's all very cool to see. But putting that nostalgia kind of aside a little bit, and I just think the setting of Chainsaw itself is just so unnerving. You know, they are in the middle of nowhere. They don't really know where they are. You know, this was an era where there wasn't a gas station every 100 feet like there is now. I just think where Texas Chainsaw takes place makes it scary before anything even starts happening. You can feel the heat. You can feel how uncomfortable and sort of angry everybody is. Being where they are, you know, that van even is just, you can just tell that air conditioning was not a common thing back then. So for me, since Chainsaw, the setting is so much of a character itself and part of the reason the movie's so unnerving, I did give it to Chainsaw, even though I love Camp Crystal Lake.
All right, Brad, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about these two films is they scare the shit out of you for two very different reasons. You're scared to death of camping after you see this movie, and you're scared to get trapped on the side of a road or stranded on the side of a road or in somewhere rural where something could happen to you, right? These both look beautiful, and that's something that you know a lot of people, I think, especially with the 13th, is underrated. I think the colors they pop about the movie pops in both of these films. But the color palette in Texas Chainsaw is off the hook. I mean, they did such a great job with the color in that movie. That becomes, I think, its own character in itself. Like it becomes a part of the setting. Texas Chainsaw, for me, there were so many parts of that movie where you kind of ask yourself, what would you do in that situation? One that really pops out to me is when the cook is taking her back to those for the first time, for the dinner. And it just feels so much longer than it actually is as it's happening. And you can't help but feel like, weren't they, you feel like it's a small area that they're in, but they drag it out. So it feels like, everything is like you're going to your supper, your last whatever. And it gives that eerie feeling. Whereas, Texas Chainsaw, I mean, I was a Boy Scout when I was a kid. And who didn't talk about that if you were a 9, 10, 11-year-old boy after seeing that movie, probably too young, once you were camping with your friends, right? And you kept thinking, and probably stayed up all night thinking something was going to happen to you. It became a story in its own. You'd create your own stories of, well, I heard that happened around here too. What is it with somebody else? Like, it created this urban legends in different parts of the world that would happen, I guess. But to give a nod, I'd go to Chainsaw as well. That movie, I mean, it just has slight nod ahead for me.
You're good on this show, Brad. I had no idea where you were gonna go until the very end. Yet you were building up these two cases, and I was like, which way is he gonna fall? So
listen, I mean, right up until we were talking earlier today, I'm like, I don't know what way I'm going to fall, because I have such love for both of these, like I think everyone else on this panel does. Mm-hmm. And it does become very difficult. And like Mia said earlier, like she had a decision made up until the last minute, right?
Yeah.
Because it can go that way depending on how you think about it in a certain way.
Yeah, and I think that's good, right? It's good to be open to the opinions, right? Because sometimes we've probably seen these movies for like how many years, so you kind of have your fixed opinion. So it's good to open up, your mind and just kind of take in what some people say. All right, so I said this on the show before, a previous show, I don't know which one, but I always said there's no way Woods are ever going to lose the setting battle for me, because and to me that's like just perfect for horror. And like you, John, I did do the Crystal Lake tour, and it was awesome, and I got to sleep in the cabin where Kevin Bacon got killed, and so it was really, really trippy. And unlike you, I can't differentiate or I can't separate myself from it. I gotta go with Friday the 13th. But I'm gonna say this, despite what I just said, it's very hard because Texas was I absolutely like loved it. Like, just from the bone throne that he had in the house, the chicken, like to the to the meat hook room, the sliding door, different type of sliding door, and then just the dinner table. Like it was really, the only reason why I'm saying this is because it's really close, even though I kind of sided easily with Woods. I love Texas, and it just, like checking out those locations next on my list kind of thing before they all disappear. But all right, we're gonna move on. Next category is the all-encompassing filmmaking, and this is where, if you've got cinematography, critique or love, this is where you say this is everything to do with the filmmaking of the film. So with that being said, we're going to start off with Mia.
This is the one I always ramble on.
I'll cut you off.
Because
No,
like people, well, everybody that's listening, they're more than likely already know that I make independent horror films with my boyfriend, but you guys might not. So I feel like I kind of like go into this one a little bit more because I, on a very small scale, know what it's like to make a horror film. And I loved what Brad said earlier about the color palette of Texas Chainsaw, because absolutely, yes, that color palette, just, there's something about it. I don't think there's a color palette to specifically 70s films that is very different. You can kind of look at a few shots of a 70s film and know it's the 70s just based off of like how it's shot in the color palette. That being said, Friday the 13th, they basically did rip off Halloween. They've admitted to it. So I don't think there was a ton of ingenious when it comes to filming it. I will say lots of genius from Tom Savini, some of his best work. I was watching the uncut version today with all of the longer kill scenes, and her throat slit, I think her name's Annie in the very beginning, her neck is perfectly matched to her face. You can't tell a difference. It is so good. And so kills can be very hard to accomplish, and hard to accomplish well. And Friday does that so well. But I feel that Tobe Hooper really pioneered that documentary feel. Like so many people thought it was like a actual real story, and oh yeah, Leatherface is down there, he's just hanging out, and it's, there's just such a it just gets under your skin when you're watching it. You're just uncomfortable. Even now you go, oh, it's still a movie, but there's just something about the way that it was filmed. And I think because like Gunnar couldn't change his clothes because they couldn't get any color wear or anything changed. So he's this big dude sweating his balls off, and he can't change his clothes for 30 some days. He smells nasty. That dinner table scene took like 24 hours straight to film, and all the food was rotting under the hot lights. I mean, it's like 100 some degrees outside, let alone they're under these hot lights. They had to have like blankets up in the windows to keep the daylight out because they were filming for so long. And they talk about the stench coming up, and it's just like the things that they went through for Chainsaw versus Friday, I think, are way more grueling, way more intense, and I think honestly pay off in the end. And for that reason, I'm gonna go with Chainsaw.
All right, next time with a little more passion. Okay, so
it's always that category.
We're gonna throw to Brian.
All right, so as much as I love Friday the 13th, this is one of the categories where Texas really takes it for me because of its filmmaking. Tobe Hooper, I think, did an amazing job with this film. The cinematography, I love that scene with the when the girl gets up from the seat and like it just tracks underneath there up to the house, and it's that low tracking shot. Fantastic. The documentary style of the film, that opening credit scene, the flashes of the corpses at the beginning. Friday the 13th, to me, it doesn't match that. It does feel like it is kind of just a standard Halloween slasher, POV shots, paint by numbers, cinematography. Unfortunately, as much as I love the film, Texas has way more complex shots.
All right, John.
Yeah, so I do want to say I'm going to take Texas Chainsaw too. But Jason, you made a point the last time we talked about Texas Chainsaw, and I've also read Gunnar Hansen's book about it. And I will say, a lot of the things we love about Texas Chainsaw are happy accidents, as Bob Ross might say. A lot of the things that ended up being on film were not necessarily brilliant directors' visions as much as that just shit happened and they caught it on film and they went with it. So as much as I think Texas Chainsaw is brilliant, there is a portion of it where it's like it just kind of happened and it wasn't as meticulous a creative artistic decision as I think sometimes it gets a little too much credit for, where I think it was just chaos that got caught in a bottle, which is amazing, which is great, which is what you kind of hope for. But I think sometimes we get a little too much credit for things that just happened that were like to Mia's point, it was grueling. Yeah, people were just miserable and they were just having a horrible time and they didn't know how to film the things they wanted to film sometimes. But it worked on when we watched the movie. But to others' point, Friday is a very sort of standardly shot and designed movie. I mean, I think it looks good. I think it does everything it's supposed to do. But, the difference between, even Halloween, is known because it was kind of a visionary way of shooting a very simple story. And I do think Friday just shot a fairly simple story and kind of did it in a very simple way, too.
All right, Brad.
Boy, it's really hard to add anything to this conversation because these three people kind of encompassed everything that I would say about this. But here's what I'll say. I mean, I agree. Texas Chainsaw is where I'm at with how the cinematography and I mentioned the color palette earlier, probably too soon meant for here. It looked beautiful. I've done these sites where they break this stuff down. I'm like, oh my god, like yeah, you never really look at the colored yellow thing until you analyze it a little bit better, and you go back to this movie the second time after learning more and being like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. That looks so now. But John made a really good point. We're all into this stuff, so we get it and we understand that grueling and we appreciate it more for what they went through. But the average person watching at home probably doesn't see it the same way. I remember being a kid watching both of these, or in my teens watching both of these, and probably at the time I would have to say I probably appreciated Friday the 13th more. I enjoyed Friday the 13th more for several reasons. Not that it necessarily broke any ground, because it really didn't, but the first person view that was happening in that movie quite a bit. I think, if I remember correctly, I think I saw Friday before I ever saw Halloween. I think it was later before I saw Halloween. So to me, drawing the comparisons wasn't there for me. Mm. So watching Friday, I was like, wow, it's so cool because who's watching this? Who is that first person? All right. So that was really captivating to me. The only other thing that I'll say about Friday, because again, yeah, there's not really, other than the effects like Mia mentioned, there's not really a lot to talk about other than the way they shoot the beginning in the town. How about you? But I always felt when I watch Friday, I always feel like it's my town. I always feel like the way they film that, it's like any small town in America or a small town in Canada, and that's how it looked to that's how it looked if you went so that kind of resonated with me and made it feel more real. But yeah, other than that, for Friday, anything else about Texas, I mean, it was just impeccably. The way the sun gleamed in the beginning, the narrating. I mean, it was just great. So my nod goes to Texas for this one again.
Nice. Yeah, I'm gonna say like it's funny, like you keep hearing Friday 13th is a rip-off of Halloween, but really like they're fairly different. Like I've seen rip-off films, and like I mean, they're except for body counts and kids getting killed, I get the concept, but I think I don't know, I think they Victor Miller, the writer, basically came out and said that they ripped it off, and I think that was a mistake for him to just openly admit it, because now it's being quoted every single time someone talks about Friday the 13th. In reference to what John said, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the first film to come around and do a second face-off. It defeated Evil Dead in season 1, and I'm just thrilled, John, that someone listened to me, because it doesn't happen very often. The fact that you reference something I said doesn't happen to me very often in life. Yeah, I think that there is that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is going to win this category for me. Friday 13th, great, I love it, but again, yeah, straightforward, nothing wrong with it. Shot very well, actually, to be honest. But nothing that this, makes it so distinct from the horror world. And Texas is like the epitome of that. I give Tobe Hooper probably a lot less credit than most people do, because I mean, for all intents and purposes, he wasn't even a nice guy. And I actually, in one of my previous shows, I interviewed Terry McMinn, who was the meat hook girl. And, and she just went on about how just really non-existent he was, even with a lot of the technical stuff. So, you think, okay, maybe not an actor's director, but anyways, so, but how brilliant does it come out? Like, I'm so happy that there's a movie like that in existence. But I will say, and I'm going to talk to something that Brad said, the first time I saw Texas, I hated the hell out of it because it was on a VHS. I couldn't see anything. It was all black. That chase scene was all just a white or a blue, baby blue shirt in some woods, and I couldn't see anything. I'm like, what the heck? This movie sucks. Why does everybody talk about this movie? So thankfully, DVD, Blu-ray kind of helped that along. But anybody have anything else to add?
Me.
No, we're good. We're moving on.
No, me.
Nope.
No, me.
Oh, hands up. Yes.
I did my hand raise, but you were looking down. So
I'm sorry. Yes, sorry.
I want to add that John, how a lot of the stuff on Chainsaw was just happy accidents. And part of the reason why I love the show is I love finding out and talking about those behind the scene things. And there's a shot where it's at the end, Gunner falls and the chainsaw falls onto his leg. And that was not supposed to happen because the blade is actually on, and it did cut through his pants. He had like a protective plate there, and it got very, very hot. So when he's looking at his leg, he really thought in the moment that he cut himself. So that's another one of those things where it's like, yeah, that wasn't like genius directing. And then I also want to add to, Brad was saying about how feels like it's his town, like when he's watching the beginning of that. I was watching it today with my boyfriend David, and he's been to all of the filming locations for Friday and everything like that, and he goes, I can take you right there where she's walking down, and then it flips to her in a gas station. He goes, and I can take you right there too, but that's in another town called Hope, and blah blah blah. And then she appears on the other side of the street where she was just walking down. And it's kind of crazy whenever you've been to those filming locations, like John said and Jason said, it feels very different, but it's very cool and lending in the filmmaking that they can go to all these different places and then connect them all together to make them feel so real and so like almost close to your heart, even though you've never been there. So that's just my 2 cents on those 2 things.
Yeah, no, that's a color commentary by Mia, which is awesome. Yeah, like, I mean, and I don't want to crap on Tobe Hooper, but I mean, you just got to watch some of his other films and you kind of figure, okay, yeah, except for the one Spielberg directed, Poltergeist, but anyways, we're going to move on to characters. So we have a couple of, I'm going to differentiate here. So we've got a category towards the end, which is antagonist. And let's just assume that Leatherface is the main antagonist, and obviously Pamela Voorhees are the main antagonists. So everybody else is fair game. You can include those 2 in this category, but just letting you know that we're going to talk about Leatherface and Pamela as the antagonist in a later category. So with that being said, we're going to go to Brian.
With the characters in both of these movies, I thought they're pretty standard. Nothing too standoutish, but I think that Texas had a little bit better characters as far as Sally and Franklin. I really enjoyed their like brother sister bond. Um, and then, so can we not count then the Sawyer family as a whole, or are we just going
You can count.
Leatherface?
No.
Okay.
They're definitely the characters that are in the film, right? So have at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, Jim Siedow as Drayton Sawyer is actually one of my favorite characters in both of these movies combined. So he also adds to like the whole cast of it, the wackiness, the performances. So the other ones were just kind of like in Friday the 13th, it was kind of just teenagers acting like, pretty standard horror movie teenagers. I think I got a little bit more from the Texas cast as far as like I didn't want to see these characters die.
Right.
For anybody that follows me on Instagram, and while I was watching them last night, and I made notes. One of the things I said on my notes when I posted was, Friday the 13th has a horniness with the cast that Texas Chainsaw just doesn't have. And the irony is, or when you want to compare them side by side, you're dealing with teens and teens, but the Friday the 13th teens are your typical horny teens. They're summer camp teens, and yeah. So there was more care to them. I found, funny enough, the people in the van, other than Sally and Franklin, everything else just felt really ambivalent. I just didn't feel like there was nothing there. It was, they were just there. They were on a road trip. There's really not much affection between anybody, even though we know that they're together. It just seems flat to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the only nod that I think that I give over to Friday, is that even though those people over there, you really don't give too much of a shot at them, they evoke how actually are in those situations, So I thought about the the antagonist side of the equation, as far as the good versus the bad guys. Now, if we want to talk about the opposite, sorry, drawing a blank. Of course, the Sawyer family, the character that they all each of them individually, and of course as in the collective, is something that of course built out over time. I mean, again, we're not talking about the person here, but they're so different in the second one. I don't know about anything else, but I originally thought that in part two, that Top was kind of this. I thought he was the same as the Hitchhiker. I thought he was like, somehow they reimagined him until, of course, later learned that's not how that was. It's a different brother, right? But you certainly, there's more development there for them. But as I mentioned earlier too, you ended this movie wanting to know more about that family and know more about the people in that movie. Friday, you don't really feel that way. Yeah, you can relate more to the characters in the moment, what's going on during the movie. But once the movie's done, I mean, we know Annie, we know Alice. Do we remember the rest of the people? I mean, some of us do. I don't think most people remember any of the other names of the counselors, right? I definitely give the nod. Oh man, that's tough. Only to Texas, just because we want to know more. We're left with that. Oh my God! But of course, we learn more. So yeah, they did something right. They left us hanging, and we wanted more of it.
All right.
All I can say.
No, very well thought out. John.
Yeah, this one was tougher kind of than I thought it would be. I do agree that the chainsaw, the kids in the van are again, no, they're not even two-dimensional. They're not even dimensional. They're just there, other than what they look like and kind of the pairings that we assume are real. We don't know anything about them. Again, I do think that is part of how the movie is told. But the Friday characters, as silly as it may be, I think they're allowed to be a little more alive and a little bit more real, because again, Chainsaw is a miserable experience from the moment we meet those people. And I think Friday, the characters don't know horrible things are about to happen to them, and they're not in such a miserable place. So I do give them the nod, because I do think that there's a little bit more affection and connection between them. Look, we know why we're watching this kind of movie and what's going to happen to them. But I think they're a little bit more alive, a little bit more engaged with each other. My only gripe with the characters in Friday is I've always thought Annie or Brenda would have been better final girls than Alice, but that's probably a whole conversation for another day.
I like that. I like that debate. Well, actually, not so much a debate. I'd probably agree with you. All right, Mia, you're up.
Yeah, Annie should have been the final girl for sure. Like, I'm so invested in her, even though they did like the Hitchcock thing where they killed her off and whatever, you're not expecting it, whatever. I just like, if we want to compare main characters, we really go to Alice and Sally. And I'm just so much more invested in Sally. And agree, the van scene, not great for those other characters. Don't really remember them. Don't really remember the scene because it's really taken over by the hitchhiker anyway, who is another character who is insanely crazy and super weird and very intriguing. And a fun fact, I've always wanted to have the same camera that he has. And my friend got it for me for Valentine's Day. So now I own that camera. And I think that the family as a whole versus Pamela Voorhees, while they both have very intriguing backstories, the family's just creepier. They're more interesting. I think there's more layers to them. And the camp counselors, they're typical teenagers. They're kind of predictable. They were, I guess, predictable at the time because this is the very early 80s. But as we now know how the 80s unfolded, they're exact, that was the formula that everybody copied from back then. And it's not super it's not memorable. It's not as, I always want to use the word interesting, but that's the word that I'm going to use. And I just really like watching Sally's journey versus Alice's. And I think maybe I would be more weighed towards Friday if it was a different actress, maybe Annie or something like that. But I'm not super thrilled with Alice, and I'm going to go with Chainsaw.
All right. I'm kind of in your situation, Brad. Like, I mean, what do you add to all that's been said? Like, you guys all covered it. I do agree with a lot of what everybody said, in particular, Brad. My opinion on this one is, yeah, I was never a big fan of Alice, but I feel that, like, these are the Friday the 13th characters, and this is the family in Texas, and these are the characters that aren't the family in Texas. So you got like Friday, like just this streamline right through the middle, and then you got the peaks in the valley, and like, which one do you go with, right? All in all, I'm gonna give it to Friday, just because I do agree. Like, those were that, like, I had a cottage back in the 80s, so like like you were saying, it's my town. It's what I that's what it felt like. It was like my town. And then when I went and visited, I was like, holy crap, this is where my cottage was. That was my older brother, my older cousins on the docks, like, I mean, and it was so, it kind of spoke to me where, nothing in Texas did. And I'm going to kind of, I don't know if I'm going to piss anybody off, but I don't even think Sally kind of rings the bell for me, because while I like the visuals of Sally and the screaming and her performance as when she screams, and like I said, and the whole attack and everything like that, I don't know. She didn't move the radar for me throughout the film. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it could have been Kirk running from Leatherface. It would have been the same thing. And I'm surprised, like, I even remember his name. Texas characters were just there, right? They were there. Friday had some, like, Crazy Ralph, like, that was pretty awesome. Like, Pamela Voorhees is a strong character. I know that's antagonist, so I'm not gonna get too into that, but like, even Ned, like the goofy guy, just a little bit of playfulness that Texas just was void of. So again, yeah, Texas kind of hit some heights with the main guy, with the family, but their lows kind of really just brought it down to me. So I'm going to give the edge slightly to Friday, but we're going to move on, unless somebody's got something to say. I thought so. All right.
Sally's so pretty, though.
She was, yeah, but no.
My only thing to add.
Sorry, I will add too. Sorry, I can't shut up sometimes.
No, go for it.
I did this whole thing last where I was basically, and I posted it on my Instagram just before we started tonight. Who's your favorite final girl? I put Sally and Alice, and I haven't checked it yet. I'm not sure who's winning, but I really struggled with that last night when I was watching. I'm like, I kind of hate both of these people. Like, these are not good final girls at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know, Sally, I give the nod to Sally as being a better final girl in some ways, but they both kind of suck.
Listen, if we're gonna be real, I'm gonna agree with that. I think Sally aesthetically was a lot more pleasing. Like, the tank top and everything was kind of like, badass. But at the end of the day, yeah, I don't know.
If I can add,
Yeah.
I think I think I agree with you guys where it's like they're both kind of not my favorites at all, but I think Sally just gets the better final girl circuit than Alice does. Like, so I think she comes off cooler because she's involved with all the stuff that's going around her. It's
She's
like Alice was a
purely
little more simple.
hysterical at the end. She's just
Yeah.
like losing her shit, whereas Alice is like, then he's still there. It's like, oh god.
I don't know if you can see that, but right now on my Instagram they're 50. So
they're what?
They're 50-50 on
really
Instagram right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not talking about acting because, well, like, listen, Marilyn Burns was, Meryl Streep herself. I'm not saying that, Alice was a great actress in the delivery, but I'm just overall, right, character. I do agree, John, like Brenda, like, like she had all the makings of that character, of that leading, that final girl, right? Like, she was the prim and proper one. But anyways, we're digressing hardcore and we're pissing off Mia. So all right, so we're gonna go on to scare factor, and we're gonna lead off with John.
Yeah, so these are two very different tones of movies. So scaring is done very differently in these movies. I will say though, Friday is very much the slumber party, co-ed teenager party where everybody's jumping and screaming and laughing and, kind of that traditional movie theater experience. Where Chainsaw is just kind of that quiet sort of dirge where you get more and more uncomfortable the more it goes on, kind of. And I think looking at it as an adult versus a 12-year-old, Friday's not really scary to me, whereas Texas, I think watching it now, it's just as unnerving, if not more so, knowing kind of how the world is. So I think Texas is scarier, although it's not the same kind of popcorn thrills and jumps and laughter and applause that Friday gives you, which is a very different and a very popular kind of scare horror slasher experience.
All right, we're going to go to Brad.
Yeah, I agree with John a lot there because to this day, while not necessarily classified in this genre, I have a hard time with movies like that. Wolf Creek being another example. Any types of movies where you could get in that situation today that could happen to you, right? And I hate the idea of something in real life killing you or happening to you. So Texas definitely gives me those vibes even today. Younger, I probably felt more towards Friday the 13th. But backing out a little bit and just kind of looking at it from a film perspective, there's so much about Friday that I appreciate that Texas doesn't necessarily do. And what that is for me is it comes down to the sound design and the score from Manfredini. I mean, it's just amazing. The music and the ambiance that's created in Friday is amazing and adds to the scare factor to me. Not necessarily what happens to the people or that I think that would happen to me now, especially, but it creates this what's going on. Listening back to Texas, and I say listening back to Texas, there's a lot of silence in Texas. There's not a lot of the same sound vision that there is in Friday. That being said, there are certainly some sounds and some uses of sound in Texas that makes you like cringe. I mean, you'll remember that photography sound for the rest of life, right? I mean, that's just an iconic sound. But not just that, there are so many times when you're watching and they're like hitting something that creates this sound that just makes you so unnerved. So it does a pretty good job too, but in the same way that Friday does. Friday has the whole package, I think, with the soundtrack, the score, I mean, and the use of sound effects. Whereas Texas, overall, scares the crap out of me because it could still happen. And then watching it as a movie, it's like the darkness and the, you know, when they're walking, when they decide that they're going to walk and try to find them, which by that point, I'm sorry, I would have just slept in the goddamn van. Like, I'm not going anywhere. Get me out of the way. Especially someone in a wheelchair. Come on, man. I remember watching it again, and I'm at home by myself. I'm laying in bed watching it, and I'm picturing them. You know, I'm seeing Mark pushing it. I'm like, oh my god, like, why are you doing this? Or that scared me. You know, that still scared me. You're still in the woods. You're still walking on a path that you have no freaking clear going, and it's scary. And then you know, being around or being, you know, restrained in a chair, that's scary as hell. And not knowing idea of what you're thinking in your head. What are they going to do next to me? You have no idea. It scares the shit out of me. Texas Chainsaw, landslide.
All right. Ryan, do you have anything different to add to that?
Oh man, I think I agree with John on this one. I do think that Friday the 13th is a different kind of scare. It's like you said, the popcorn movie theater jump scares. Texas Chainsaw is just pure dread. Like, you leave that movie changed. You're thinking about that movie when you leave the theater. I think Friday's a little bit more, okay, you got your jump scares and now you're out of the theater. What are we gonna go get to eat? You're done thinking about it. So Texas, I think, is easily the bigger scare factor movie here. Visuals, maybe the sound doesn't have, again, like that big Friday the 13th soundtrack here, but there's all these other creepy sounds that are, I think, more lingering. This movie scares and fear lingers. Friday the 13th is more passive. So Texas Chainsaw.
Mia.
This is so reminiscent of The Omen versus Rosemary's Baby, because they're two different types of scary, like we were talking before. And agreed, echoing everything everybody's already said. You feel gross and grimy. You want to take a shower after you watch Chainsaw. It gets under your skin. Not taking anything away from the fear that some people probably have experienced the first time they watched Friday the 13th, especially if you watched it, you know, as a younger kid back in the 80s. But it's just like an existential dread, like Brian said. And yeah, not gonna harp on it much more. Texas Chainsaw for sure.
Well, I'm the lone wolf on this one, and I'm gonna go with Friday. And the reason why is I get everything with Texas, and to this day I don't know very many women that this film doesn't scare or just disturb. So that's kind of cool. Now I did show both films to a little one at one point, and Texas was just kind of like okay, that was just insanity. And Friday got a little under the skin. So, you know, I think it depends, I guess, what, you know, what, I guess it depends on your perspective watching these films. The reason why I picked Friday is because, while yes, the horrors of what can happen in Texas are horrible, Friday the 13th is real for me. I've been in a cottage where it's black outside and I'm stuck in a bed and I'm like, you know, kind of thinking about things. And I got to be honest, even still to this day, if I'm out in the woods, you know, there's an unnerving feeling that comes over me. And where these films, neither of them really scare me, I'm trying to just kind of base my opinion on the scenario. And the scenario of being stuck at a camp or woods that are foreign to you, and finding bodies all over the place, that just kind of freaks me out a little bit more. All right, so this one should be interesting. The kills. So we're gonna start with. Does anybody want to start? No, you're ready to go? Okay, we're gonna go with Brad. I was gonna say everybody wants to kind of hear what everybody has to say, and then, like, you know, but we're gonna start with Brad.
So, I'm kind of indifferent about the kills, if I'm to be honest. For one, I love what they did in Friday. I like the pacing of the kills in Friday. I like how it was, the kills almost made you guess like what's going to happen next. Whereas in Texas, kills other than, leading up to Sally kind of having her battle with the family are kind of quick. They're like bang, 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 bang. They're all dead. Now let's, have this battle. And that's fine and it works. You're left still with Texas, even though we know what's happening, you're still left kind of imagining a lot of it. There's not really shown with the kills, I find anyway, versus what they did in Friday. I mean, Mia mentioned the neck slice. I mean, man, oh man, who doesn't think about that, right? Like, these are things that, like, I think the kills, to be honest, are just much better executed in Friday. They just look better. The pacing is better. Overall, you're like, you're wondering who's next. You don't have time to even think who's next in Texas. It's just, okay, now he's dead. Now she's dead. Now now Sally. Okay, cool. And that's fine. But I got to give the nod to Friday for this one.
All right, Brian.
So Friday the 13th, it's not really that a big of a surprise. Tom Savini did some of his best work here, coming off of Dawn of the Dead, which was all excellent effects as well. And then he just tops himself with Friday the 13th. Kevin Bacon's arrow through the neck, the throat slitting from the beginning, the fantastic decapitation of Mrs. Voorhees is one of the best decapitations of all of horror. So yeah, I think Friday Visit, it is so gruesome and focused, and I like how, coming off of talking about the scare factor, it is attached to like the pops, the scares. Every time there's a jump, it leads right into the kill. It's part of the kill as well. While Texas is like, it's called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there's not that much blood and gore in it that you might expect from the title. So Friday the 13th.
Mia.
Being a Pittsburgh native, I'd be betraying Tom Savini if I didn't say Friday the 13th. Fun fact, my friend from beauty school lives right down the street from him, and he'll sit on his porch and drink his coffee and wave to her on her way to work.
Nice.
Bro, Savini's so good in anything he does, but Friday is really, he kind of just was like, do your thing, do what you want to do, and he was able to just kind of let loose. And he was fresh from Vietnam, fresh off of Dawn of the Dead, and I don't know, I think Brian made a great remark about how Chainsaw Massacre, but it's not so much massacre as it is just like, ooh, I don't want to be there. Not so much blood, gore, and lots of killing. I'm not sure the exact counts, but I'm sure there's more kills in Friday. And yeah, definitely Friday.
John, you gonna rock the boat here?
This one was a lot tougher than I thought it would be, because the instinct is very obvious to just say Friday the 13th because of the Savini kills. And to the other points that people made, and there's a momentum to the kills in Friday the 13th. They keep adding to the mystery. One person gets killed, you don't know what's going to happen next. The next person is killed, the arrow through the neck, no one saw that coming. What's next? It keeps you asking questions. In Chainsaw, when they get killed, that story is over. Like, there is nothing left for that character to do, to think. Like, that ends that part of the story completely, which I think is really cool, because it doesn't have that narrative, we're working towards one person vibe that slasher movies have sort of created of their own. It adds up. You don't know, these people aren't doing anything specific, they're just wandering around, and all of a sudden that door just gets slammed on them, literally and metaphorically, and their story is done. And that's scary, because again, we want to assume characters have arcs and that these interactions are going to mean something dramatically going forward. But when those characters are dead in Texas Chainsaw, they are dead as dead gets. And there's nothing else to think about regarding, which I think is really cool. And again, really scary, because we all assume if we're in a story like this that we're going to have a valuable contribution to it. And those characters do not. They're just wandering around in Texas and they get killed dead. So I think that's really cool and really scary. Saying all of that in defense of Chainsaw,
I'm sensing a butt.
But the visual style, people talk about Friday knocking off Halloween, but really there are 8,000 knockoffs of Friday the 13th and the kills Tom Savini did that all came out within the next 2 years. It was just this onslaught of ripoffs of Friday the 13th because of Tom Savini's kills. And again, there's an artistry to them. It's not just putting the camera on a really gruesome thing. It's still sleight of hand. It's still, we see blood, but it's not, their head's not falling off backwards, or you can see every, organ inside them. It's still done very artistically, and it's more subtle, I think, than people think. There's just blood, but it's not just these relentless, I can't think of another word other than massacre kind of attacks. There's not a lot to them, but they push the movie along. So again, that narrative drive that Texas doesn't have, Friday kind of gets that because the kills are kind of building on each other. Again, to that final kill where the most ridiculous kill of them all comes for the person who was doing all the other killings, which I think is, a pretty poetic way to wrap that up.
All right. So it's funny. I'm gonna comment on something that you said a few times, John. When they're dead, they're dead. Terry McMinn, who played Pam, got hung on the meat hook, got thrown in a freezer. She actually believes her character survived. So I don't know what kind of what's possessed her to think that. However, it just kind of, when you were saying dead, I was like, well, tell that to her. I loved Texas's kills. I loved that meat hook, the way she stopped short, and we're talking like characters, but her acting on that hook is amazing. Like, she sells it. I don't know how great an actress she is with everything else in her career, but she sells that hook. Kirk, or the other guy, I forgot his name. I love the movie so much, but we still can't even remember their names. The guy, and he's convulsing at the door, like, that's it. The hammer in the head, it wasn't too great, but at the same time, you felt it. So funny enough, actually, the only kill that really is just like is Franklin getting chainsawed with the chainsaw. Like, the other ones, I think, kind of resonate a little bit more. But Friday the 13th gets it for me as well, because they were fun. They were Tom Savini, right? Like, I mean, he gets a lot of love, and some of his effects are kind of crude and maybe not perfect, but it works. But I kind of liked a couple of other things. I loved Brenda's death, because, like, it was so creepy, where she's like looking at, that's a scary sequence for me, where she's like hearing "help me," and she kind of goes out in the rain. Like, to me, that death was like awesome. I don't even know what happened to her. And I also kind of like that. Well, I guess it's technically second death, where those two counselors were making out in the very, very beginning. And then it goes to a whiteout. Like, basically, instead of going to a blackout, which everything always kind of fades to black, she's kind of backed in a corner, and it just kind of goes to a whiteout with that score. And that was an example of how the kills, even when they weren't, bloody or whatever, I thought were really effective in Friday. Again, kind of speaking to where I say, like, the movie kind of gets a bad rap sometimes, or an unfair rap. I'm going to give it to Friday. But yeah, it was fun. That was a fun
I will say quickly, I've laughed for a long time about the sheer strength Pamela Voorhees must have to chuck 120-pound Brenda through a window. I mean, that's a very impressive feat of strength for a somewhat older lady.
But I agree with you. But if you look through most of the other kills, they are plausible. I will say that. Like, I mean, well, that wasn't even really a kill. That was kind of throwing her through the window. But, like, well, maybe Hank suspending. Okay, we won't go there. The other thing about that throat slit, it's one of my favorites, and the reason why, it kind of looks like a glorified paper cut. Like, it looks raw. Like, it's yeah. All right. So we're gonna move on to antagonist. And on paper, you could probably say Leatherface versus Pamela Voorhees is a wash, but we'll see what happens. We're going to start with Mia.
I have to talk this one out.
Do it. We're here for you.
Obviously, I think if you're looking at both of them side by side, it seems obvious that you'd want to choose Leatherface. However, when you start to like dissect the films and things like that, Leatherface is kind of clumsy. Like his brain, he's not all there. He's just big and hefty and has a lot of muscle mass to him. Pamela's not that, and she's still able to go through and slice some motherfuckers up, and very calculated, very cold. Leatherface is doing it because he doesn't know any better, and he's just basically been told to do so. Pamela has like she's got revenge, she's got motive, and so oh man, I think Leatherface would be scarier probably in the moment, because if I'm going to die by either one of them, I'm going to be more terrified looking at Leatherface than I am looking at Pamela. But I think the like backstories of both of them, and I guess the ability level, I feel like I'm going to have a better chance at getting away from Leatherface because I could outsmart him or possibly outrun him. He could trip and fall. Pamela, she's like, no, bitch. No. I'm mother. I know best, and you're going to motherfucking die. So I think I'm going to go with Pamela on this. Honestly, really. Yeah, I am.
So, you know, this is an example of like, you know, where it's kind of cool to have a panel like this because, you know, you threw out perspectives that, like I said, on paper just aren't there. And it's neat. So it's really, I mean, it's all a matter of opinion, and there's 5 people here with probably 5 different opinions. That being said, we're gonna go to Brian.
So like Mia was saying, Leatherface and Pamela, put them together. Leatherface is obviously more terrifying. He's such an iconic, his mask and everything, iconic look. Pamela kind of gets overshadowed in the series by Jason later on. But again, what I agree with is that she's so like tactile. Like a lot of people credit that with Jason and his behaviors with his kills. And it's like she's the one who taught it or started it. So it's like it's almost like he learned it from her. Like she was very calculative, not like super she used all these different like arrows and knives and machetes, and so I thought that was cool because Leatherface is pretty, he just had kind of his hammer and his chainsaw. But again, what makes Pamela my choice here is she is scarier because she's like a mother who lost a kid and is now going after these kids for revenge, essentially. And it's like that could be any of us in a situation. One bad day could make this happen to us. It's not, you don't really feel that relatability with someone like Leatherface. Like Pamela Voorhees has a very strong motive, and I think that is what makes her such a better antagonist for me.
Very well said. Wow, 2-0 for Pamela over Leatherface. Who would have thought about that? All right, we're gonna go to John.
So here's where I'm going to muddy the waters a bit.
All right, I like it.
Because to me, I can't separate the antagonists of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Because to me, the antagonist is the cook who's taught these people, as far as we know, to be what they are. And he has these weird moral dilemmas throughout the movie where at first he just tries to get rid of them. And then he tries to get them to stay. When he finds out where they're trying to dig around, he doesn't want them going there because he knows what's going to happen. So he tries to get them to stay. And, you know, wait around for the ribs. There'll be a gas here in a couple hours, eat some ribs, even though those are people. But so Leatherface to me is kind of a pawn in his game. And he's more complex, I think, because to Mia's point, he's not mentally there that we know of. He is uncoordinated and slow and confused a lot. He doesn't really become this ruthless killer to that very last chase. In the early scenes when he kills people, he's still confused and scared. He doesn't know if he did the right thing. It's all kind of through body language. What I love about Pamela is that she's not a monolithic killer. Like, she knows she's probably not going to be able to fight Kevin Bacon, even though she can throw Brenda through a window at 120 pounds. But she knows, so she outsmarts them. She's ahead of them the entire time until everybody's gone. So she puts plans in place. You know, this is the third or fourth time we know she shut this camp down. So she's escalating her game. She's trying the things that keep her hands a little more clean, right? You know, vandalism, poisoning the water, burning, setting fires. Now she's like, okay, we got to up the game. But she doesn't just show up and just start hacking these people. She watches them, she follows them, she sees where they're vulnerable. So she outsmarts them to kill them and finds them when they're in dangerous situations. Instead of just chasing them down with a machete, knowing that they could probably outrun her and beat her up. All that being said, and giving myself my out, I'm still going to go with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre killers. Again, just because there's that mean-spiritedness, the cruelty of them, the ruthlessness, the kind of, and then the weird manic glee they get as time goes on. You know, it's a little bit scarier because we don't really know what they're doing, whereas Pamela has that very specific mission she's on. And we just think the son drove them crazy as far as we can tell. So I think that to me makes them scarier because, again, there's that element of they're just these factors of chaos in this area that if you wouldn't go there, you would never know anything about any of that. You'd have to do a very specific thing in a very specific place, and then they just unleash this carnage on you just because, again, you showed up when there wasn't enough gas in the gas station and walked around the places you shouldn't have walked around.
Wow. You guys are killing this category. No pressure, Brad. You're up.
Man, oh man. You know, surface level, when we say to other horror fans, you like Texas Chainsaw or Friday the 13th better, they usually say Jason versus Leatherface, right? So we're taking a totally different angle on this.
Mm-hmm.
Not really different, just we're in the know. If you're talking about the original, we're talking about really Pamela versus Drayton. And that really is, to break it down, Leatherface dog. Leatherface just listens to what he's told to do. He's not making any of those decisions on his own. He's like John said, a pawn, or I was going to say, a puppet. And that's really, so I don't think we ever know, especially in the first movie, what he actually feels. I really don't. And there's something, of course, really scary about that, right? Someone that can just do anything and not have any remorse or have any particular feeling about it. Now, that being said, that might be scary, but what's scary is me just sitting here right now and somebody coming up from behind and putting an arrow through my back, right? Like, that's a hell of a lot scarier because I'm not expecting it. And, it makes you think at home, Jesus, that could happen to me. Like, someone could just come up from behind out of the blue and fucking do something to me. Whereas the whole point of Texas is to create this, we're going to massacre everybody. And you're going into it. That's the name of the goddamn movie, right? So, the scares are only scary, but the genius of someone that you can't imagine would be able to do this to you, being able to do this to you, is a hell of a lot scarier. And for that reason, Friday gets my nod.
Nice. Yeah, very, very, everybody's making great points and different points too, which is really cool. Like, I love Leatherface from the original. Like, the imagery of him, like his masks, and it's just to me, it's horror, right? It was, in 1974 there really wasn't a strong horror genre, and he was, he was probably a pioneer, and it took years for it to get to where it had to be. The thing with Friday the 13th is and this is an example again of, the franchise becoming bigger than the original film. I'd love to talk to people who saw this in the theaters, and I'd love to get an honest opinion. There's no one that picked the mom to be the killer. There's no there's no way you could have done that. And it's not, and this was the kind of a brilliant this is the brilliance of the film, is it's not like they shoehorned like the mom in and it didn't work. They kind of laid, you know, the groundwork early on, and it made sense. It made sense. It wasn't just, what could we do that no one would expect? Okay, the mom, let's put her in there. No, it made sense, and it was completely out of left field. And for me, I mean, it wasn't the first Friday the 13th I saw, and I remember my brother telling me that in one of the Friday the 13th, it's his mom that kills, and I laughed. I was like, what? Like, you know, it made no sense, right? His mom. And lo and behold, it was part one. It's a mom, right? It's a mom. It's killing for your kid. And, you know, I'd do that any day, you know, if the circumstances were, you know, not, well, I don't want to incriminate myself on video here, but I'm just saying that if ever I was going to kill, it would be for my kid. But anyway, so I'm going to give it to Pamela, and this is a perfect example of my answer changed by listening to everybody. I was Leatherface all the way on this one. So thanks for making up my mind. All right.
Wait.
Yes, Mia, you may speak.
I want to say John makes such a great point with like the family as a whole. And if I would have thought of that, I think I would have maybe had like a stronger stance towards them.
Mm.
I still probably would have went with Pamela, but future episode, potentially House of a Thousand Corpses versus Texas Chainsaw, because when he was like explaining the whole Sawyer family, it really made me think of like the Firefly family. And yeah, that's all. Just wanted to like potentially throw that out there, because I'll forget. I'll message him and I'll forget. So I just want to say it right now. Otherwise,
okay, because I was going to say, keep your producing ideas off camera. All right. All right. No, I'm just joking. It was good. Okay, so here it is, the bonus category. All right, you guys ready for this one? This one should be pretty straightforward, but I'm really interested. We're gonna critique the posters. All right, so that's the Texas poster we're referring to, the original, and that's the Friday the 13th poster. We're gonna start off with Brian, because you look like you're dying to say something.
I was thinking about it the whole time. I was like, is the bonus round going to be the posters?
Really?
Yeah. I was like,
wow. Okay, cool.
I saw the t-shirts in the back and I was like, I feel like there might be something there.
All right, damn it, gave it away.
I was so thinking about it though. I look at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre poster and I'm like, that's terrifying. Terrifying figure on it. It's a Lie, the name of the movie. So on face
can't
value,
get over that, can you?
No, I can't. I so misleading. But yeah, so I think it's a better horror movie poster as far as like the basic looks and stuff. But I've always been drawn to that Friday the 13th poster. The outline, the silhouette, the characters in, I know on some more recent t-shirts and stuff, they've taken out the characters from the middle of it, but I like when the characters are in there in front of the cabin. You have the moon, the blood dripping off the knife is really awesome, and I think it just represents the movie better for me. Like, it's just so, it's not too explicit. It leaves some mystery behind it. I like how Pamela's silhouette is kind of engulfing everything, kind of like it sells the mystery.
Can I check?
Yeah.
Get in there.
I was going to say that poster is kind of lying as well, because there's no way that that's Pamela's silhouette. In my opinion, that's you know,
that's true.
like, maybe, but I don't think so.
Yeah. But it does take place on Friday the 13th, I think.
All right.
So Friday the 13th is, I do like that poster a lot more. I like how it just plays more into the mystery. It's very simple. And I think it just kind of represents Pamela's overall control over the situation as far as connecting back to the actual story.
Deep answer. Deep answer. All right, Brad, have at it.
I mean, I agree with you. To me, that's the poster. I actually have a 3D poster around here somewhere, in the back office somewhere of like it's actually like dug out. It's not like a lenticular. It's actually like made 3D, and it's really really cool. Sometimes I don't remember what the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre looks like, and I know now we're looking at it and like, yeah, oh yeah, that's it.
Mhm.
Because to me, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre poster, I think of the breakfast poster. I think in number 2, that's more iconic than the original Texas Chainsaw poster. So for the original Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw's cool and has colors on it, and I have that shirt somewhere as well. But Friday definitely all the way.
Were you referring to the Texas to like the Breakfast Club poster?
Yeah, the Breakfast Club poster.
I
and
love
that's
that.
love that poster.
Yeah. All right, Mia, you took off. Do you want? We'll save you for last. We're gonna make you wait. John, you're up. Sorry.
If anybody who follows my Instagram, I love 70s horror. I did a huge countdown about 70s horror last year, and I love Texas Chainsaw's poster because it's a very crass 70s B movie exploitation poster. I like the artistry of the Friday poster and how it suggests so much, especially if you've already seen it. Suggests a lot before you see the movie, and then once you see the movie, it kind of suggests more. But I like the crass taglines in Texas Chainsaw and that whole sort of B movie drive-in vibe the poster has. The scene is almost obnoxious to put that scene on a poster.
Mhm.
Because it's the most memorable and graphic scene in the entire movie, so it's leaving nothing else to the imagination, kind of. But that's what I like about it. I just love that it's that big, overblown, obnoxious 70s B movie poster.
All right, Mia, what surprised you for us?
100% love what John was saying about the 70s exploitation movie poster. I'm a big simp for the 70s, love the 70s. That being said, I think the Friday poster is more interesting to look at. I think the Chainsaw poster is more aesthetically pleasing. If I'm going to hang the two, I'm going to hang Chainsaw. But it's very much like, here's what the movie is, and that's the end of it. Whereas if you look at Friday, it's like, here's what the movie is, but then here's what the movie is. And I really like what Brian was saying about how, is that really Pamela? Yeah, maybe in her sweater, like her big lumpy sweater, like Brad was saying, like, oh no. But it's showing right off the bat it's a murder mystery because they're holding the knife. Is this the 3D poster you were talking about?
That is exactly the 3D poster I'm talking about.
Wow.
So when you were describing it, I was like, that sounds really familiar. And then I was like, I think we have that in here.
That's
and then I
cool.
went and I was like, oh, I'm going to grab that real quick so that everybody knows. If you're watching this rather than listening, you can actually see the 3D print poster that
that's the
Brad
one.
was talking about.
That's awesome.
It's hanging
And
on the side of our...
I have a sign by Ari Lehman.
Nice.
That Shock Stock years ago. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I have
Cool.
it's really weird. I have a Halloween card signed by Ari because he's really good friends with an antique store owner up north Pennsylvania, and he plays like his cover band will play sometimes there. And my dad used to live there. This is like really left field. Side notes right now. But I have a Jason tattoo on my leg, and he saw it and he was like, oh, I'm friends with Ari. And so he actually sent a picture of my tattoo to Ari. Ari replied and was like, oh, that's so cool. And then he handed me a card, and he had Ari like sign all of these random Halloween cards so he could hand out to certain people. So I have a Halloween card signed by Ari. But anyway,
that's so cool.
End of rant. I'm gonna go with Friday just because I think it's just a little bit more interesting to the movie itself. However, not taking anything away from Chainsaw and how aesthetically pleasing and perfectly 70s it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna be really, really short. John, I agree with what you said, but Friday the 13th is my favorite, I think, movie poster of all time. And you guys all said why. So we will move on to the ending. Apropos. So This is it, the final category. And I got to be honest, I'm looking at my score sheet and there's a lot of T's and F's. So this one's going to be pretty close. So it might come down to what we all think about this last category. And we're going to start off with Mia.
Oh, I was afraid you were going to do that. Okay. So the end of Friday, I have to talk this one out too, because I like to watch the movies, but I don't like to look into them too much. I like to make mental notes in my head, but I really like to discuss it and listen to everybody else's viewpoints before I make a hard decision. But you have that like final showdown, the reveal of Pamela, her explaining, I'm an old friend of the Christies, just like you can hear it in your head. It's very iconic. And just kind of the final battle between her and Alice is very, you don't really know who's going to win, because if Pamela's been able to do that the whole time, like what's really stopping Alice? She's a virgin. Okay, great, whatever. But it's a very rewarding ending, and knowing who the killer is and not being upset over who the killer is. The ending of Chainsaw, we already know who the killer is. We've been kind of dealing with this existential dread the whole time. You're very kind of clung to the end of your seat on, is he going to get her, or is she actually going to get away? Because you really think that he probably will. And her getting on the back of that truck, I mean, she really just gets onto the back of that truck. I mean, just straight to the part. Even whenever he's starting to drive, you're still like, I don't know. It's because you're really on the edge of your seat that whole time. And I think Sally, she's just off her freaking rocker as anybody would be in that exact moment. And that's also really rewarding to see her have to endure that. You just had to endure it with her. You had to sit there, you had to watch it, you had to feel it. And that's really rewarding. And I think it's a little bit more rewarding than finding out that Pamela's the killer and seeing her head being cut off. I kind of feel for Pamela. I understand why she's doing what she's doing. And I think I just like Chainsaw's ending just a little bit more, because I'm happier to see Sally get away than I am to see Pamela die. So yeah, Chainsaw.
All right, Brian.
All right, so Texas Chainsaw, again, like Mia said, all more exciting. The chase scene is amazing. Her going off on the truck and Leatherface just doing his dance thing. It's like, yeah, she got away, but did she really? Like, she's probably left with so much traumatic like baggage she's gonna have to carry for the rest of her life. And I really like all that stuff. Great. The dinner scene was fantastic. But it kind of just comes down to one thing for me, and it's like Jason coming out of the lake. And that's pretty much why I think Friday the 13th has the best ending. It's like no one expected that. It shocked everyone I show that movie to for the first time. They jump like they've never jumped before. Yeah, I think the only bad thing about it, I think, is that it ended up being a dream sequence, which I think it should have just cut to credits right after that. But Jason coming out of the lake, that jump scare, always sticks with me since I saw that movie when I was way too young to see it. So Friday the 13th for me has the best ending.
All right, John.
Yeah, again, you're talking about two of the most iconic endings certainly in horror history, if not movie history, and certainly in slasher history. What do I pick? I'm going back and forth in my head as we speak. If you see my notes, I've scribbled it out a couple different times. I went with Chainsaw here. Again, I just think that movie keeps getting weirder and weirder and weirder. And by the time Sally escapes, again, it's not like she doesn't become like this badass soldier who can just kill everybody. She just escapes literally by the skin of her teeth. And to have it end with Leatherface just circling and dancing, and it's just the most, again, an even more bizarre ending to a movie that's just perpetually getting more bizarre. You don't know how far they have to go to find other people. You don't know what's going to happen the next day in terms of, is Sally going to go to the police? Are they going to go investigate this? again, it's just another almost absurd moment at the end of a movie that is as terrifying as it is, gets increasingly more ridiculous as it goes on. Jason coming out of the lake is horror history. We've all, they built an entire franchise off Jason coming out of the lake. It's an amazing moment. But again, it goes back to everybody involved with the movie's like, we just wanted to do something like the end of Carrie. They just, and they're all fighting over whose idea it was to rip off the last scene of Carrie. If you read, the book about the making in Blairstown, everybody claims they all claim they saw Carrie, and they wanted to do the ending. So again, it's amazing, but it wasn't like the most like creatively inspired or original moment, in the sense that they were doing it for the sheer purpose of having a jump scare, because the movie that came out a couple of years ago had that, and they wanted to do that too.
Rad.
Oh boy. Okay. Let's pretend no other Texas Chainsaw and no other Friday the 13th ever out. If we pretend that, Texas Chainsaw definitely has the best ending of the two. So my vote is for Texas. However, you can't tell me, watching the subsequent films, especially in Texas, that you were like, well, why the fuck did they not go back and tell us what happened exactly after Sally got away? That's the story I want to hear after. And I mean, apparently it exists. We just never ever were privy to see it. It's, Bill says it's out there, but who knows? I don't know. That bugged it out of me, because like, I'm going to compare it to something else. I compare it to like Return of the Living Dead, which is a movie of all time. Return of the Living Dead, going into part 2, it's like, well, what the fuck happened at the end of Return of the Living Dead? What didn't we get to see what happened after that?
Yeah.
I want to see what happened after Sally got away, and we never really got to see that. So, again, let's pretend it didn't exist. Texas Chainsaw gets my vote.
All right. I like the logic. This one was really hard for me. The way like that dance, right? That Leatherface does, dance, kind of using that term, but like, it's kind of like, you've seen him flip out, and it's like, okay, well, clearly no one's gotten away before, because that's a reaction. So I like that. And the other thing I liked about Texas was the fact that, like, when you're watching it, it's just, it's first of all, it's the 70s, so you know that, and then you're watching it, and you're like, I don't know if the good guys are gonna win, because this movie doesn't really need to make the good guys win. Again, the 70s, right? They did that. But if I'm gonna get a little technical here, I thought the ending of Texas got a little sloppy, like that truck driver, clearly not an actor, just kind of stumbles out, no lines, just runs back in, just kind of it seemed a little bit sloppy. And that, that's filmmaking, and so I think Friday was a little bit tighter. That jump scare, they could talk about how they ripped off Carrie, but in a way, I think that was even better than Carrie's ending, in my opinion. You got to see Jason, right? Like, this was the reveal. Like, you think it was going to be him. No, it's not him. It's mom. And then they give you everything by unleashing Jason on you. And lo and behold, we didn't know what was going to ensue after that. But the other thing I liked about the Friday ending was, like you said, Mia, that battle, that was a good fight. That was a really, really good fight between two women. You don't see that very often in a horror film, and it ends in a beheading, right? That gives you everything. It gave you the big kill, it gave you the big jump scare, it gave you a little bit of wondering what was going to happen, and it was just done a little tighter than Texas. Everything I've picked has been by the slightest of margins, and this one was really tough, because I love Leatherface spinning around with that saw, and then it cuts to black before the sound even cuts out. Like, I love that. Like, it's just so iconic, right? But I'm gonna give it slightly to Friday, and I hate doing that because I love that Texas ending. But all right, so we've gone. Not only was this the biggest panel, it was also the most questions with the bonus question. So we did it all. You guys were awesome. Great insight. Probably the best insight I've had on one of these shows. So a credit to you. So we'll be back with the winner. All right, so we're back to unveil the winner of Horror Face Off, Texas Chainsaw Massacre versus Friday the 13th. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just a reminder, is the first movie to be on 2 episodes. Took down Evil Dead in season 1. Mia's getting ready here, getting ready to unveil the winner. This was an amazing episode for so many reasons, and the best reason of all is the final score. With a 23-22 win, Friday the 13th.
Oh.
So there we have it. Friday the 13th. I thought it was trending towards Texas early on, but yeah. So we're John, surprised?
No, I think Friday, to me, again, the difference here is, are you talking is nostalgic love versus like, what's the word, innovative filmmaking, which I think is what Chainsaw kind of changed filmmaking. It was made in a very unique and distinct way. But I do think people love Friday much more than they love Texas Chainsaw. If we're just talking the casual comment, people, if you say anything about Friday the 13th, people know what you're talking about. People don't really know that much about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's a very different movie than people actually think it is.
Really, it's funny because I think in the horror world, though, I think I would think that Texas kind of would be a little bit more popular. But what the hell do I know? Brad, you have fun?
Oh, it was great. I had a blast with you guys. John made a good point about, I was going to say this earlier and it didn't come up. We talk about Leatherface, and we put Leatherface in the same category as your Freddys and your Jasons and your Myers, and he definitely belonged in that category as well. But I think the original Texas Chainsaw kind of more falls in line in the genre or the categories with Motel Hell and drawing a blank on the other one. Oh, The Hills Have Eyes. To me, was more of that type of movie than it was a slasher, right? And I think over time, Leatherface became iconic, and we got more of the outlandish versions of movie or ongoing, sequels, and he became, the big icon that he is. But I think the original, on its own, kind of fits in the category with those movies, personally.
I agree. And I think the thing that worked for the film was the title, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's a title that you have to check out if you're a horror fan, right? You can't not, it's just, and, to think that it was almost called Head Cheese and stuff. Like I do not think that it would have, honestly, I don't think we'd be talking Leatherface. I don't think we'd be talking about, it'd just be the sloppy independent film that some people might like. But that title, that's the power of a title right there. Ryan, you're coming back for more shows. How was it? You okay?
Hey, I'm happy that Friday won, even though I did put a few blows into it, but I couldn't escape it with certain categories because these are 2 great films, but cool. Friday was always my
favorite,
my choice, my favorite. So.
And Mia, you're sitting out the next episode that we're shooting, which is a rarity now.
Listen, I just rescheduled. I work at the antique store that day, and I only work 3 hours that day. I only work 12 to 3. But and she's not like super like whatever. Like if I really like had something like, not that this is not important.
If you really cared about this show.
It's so important to me. You have no idea. No, you do know. But I just rescheduled the other day to do graduation photos for one of my dance kids the other day, and I don't want to reschedule another one because I feel bad. I just started at this antique store, so I'm just trying like really hard to just be a good little worker bee, and it's only a 3-hour shift. So I was like, I'm just gonna
You
keep
don't want to
it.
piss. You don't want to
whatever.
piss them off. You want to piss me off. I get it. All right. Thanks everybody for being on the show. This was an awesome show. I can't wait to talk to you all again about different horror films. Send me your suggestions. But for now, that's all for Horror Face Off. We'll see you soon.